It is my pleasure to welcome all of our ISM members and guests to today's program, hosted by ISM New Jersey and sponsored by Epicor. Please be sure to use the chat for any comments or questions that you may have for today's speakers. I would like to introduce you to the first episode in our new four-part webinar series called Hiding in Plain Sight. Today's episode will be about automating simple processes for exceptional efficiency and featuring speakers from both Salesforce and DocStar. At this point, I will now turn the program over to our host for today, Joe, and Joe's going to introduce himself so you get to know him.
Thank you, Kathy, and hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on automating simple processes for exceptional efficiencies. My name is Joe Sapereira, and I'll be hosting your call today. My role today is that of an enterprise content management consultant. I have over 25 years' experience helping clients identify inefficient processes and implementing process automation tools using Six Sigma methodologies. I've worked with companies with as little as 50 employees all the way up to multi-million-dollar enterprises, and I find that companies from either end of the spectrum and everywhere in between experience the same types of inefficient processes. So I'm especially excited to be part of this conversation today. I'm also excited to have this discussion with my two panel participants. First, I'd like to introduce Bruce Richardson. Bruce is currently with Salesforce and joined them as the company's first chief enterprise strategist. His responsibilities include looking at new growth opportunities for products and vertical markets. Prior to joining Salesforce, he was the chief strategy officer at Infor. Bruce also served for nearly 20 years as the chief research officer at AMR Research. I'm also excited to introduce to you Jenny Victor from Epicor. Jenny serves as the chief marketing officer overseeing the company's global marketing strategy, including product marketing, corporate marketing, field marketing, and customer marketing. Jenny brings over 20 years of marketing leadership experience, both in corporate and senior level product environments. Prior to joining Epicor, Jenny served as a senior vice president of marketing at Reciprocity, a cyber risk startup. Before her role at Reciprocity, she served as vice president, industry, go-to-market, and enablement for OpenText, where she led industry marketing, consumer marketing, technical marketing, and strategic sales enablement, in addition to her responsibilities for improving and optimizing go-to-market strategies. Well, with that, thank you both for joining us today in this discussion on automating simple processes for exceptional efficiencies. With that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. And I think the first thing we ought to do really is describe what we mean when we discuss process automation. I'll go ahead and share my thoughts on this, and then I'll ask our panelists to do the same. But for me, people often mistake the role of automation as a way of replacing human workers. To me, a more accurate way of describing automation is the process of streamlining manual tasks to help free employees up so they can focus on more rewarding and valuable work. For example, an analyst could save time if they didn't have to spend hours keying in data from paper documents or making decisions on every transaction that comes across their desk. What if you could automate the collection of data as well as decision-making process? Analysts could then focus on uncovering valuable insights that help drive business decisions. So with that, that really is my explanation of what process automation is. And with that, I'd like to bring in Bruce and ask Bruce, can you share with us how you define process automation?
Joe, I would go with pretty much what you said. The only thing I would add is the elimination of any steps that don't really create any value. So I was reading this morning, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but it was a case study from AT&T on some of the stuff they've done about digitizing their processes. And they talked about, the CTO talked about having an expense report kicked back because of an $8 error. That $8 error probably cost AT&T hundreds of dollars to process that in terms of lost time and opportunities and things like that. So anything that doesn't add value, we should just eliminate. And
Yeah.
also, you think of some stuff today. I was talking to a C-level executive who told me that still today, 2024, about half of their orders still come in manually, including some sent via fax, PDFs, and lots from EDI. And, it's funny, you think about EDI, it dates back to the Berlin airlift in the 1940s, and yet we're still relying on that to process a lot of orders. And those manual orders cost anywhere from, $8 to $30, to process. And if there's an error, it could be as much as 250. So when you're thinking about your procurement process, think really holistically and say, what are the steps that aren't adding value, or how do we change that so that we can digitize more of that and actually save a lot of money? So the theme of today's talk, hiding in plain sight, is a perfect example of stuff that if it isn't broken, we need to break it and replace it with something digital that works better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, if you think about it, those customers that are using EDI are in the forefront, right? I mean, a lot of times, I like to mention I've started in this business 25 years ago, and the idea behind the company I worked for was to go paperless. And here we are 25 years later, and the majority of our customers are still processing manually paper-based invoices. Even if they're receiving those invoices through emails as PDF, the first thing they do is they print out that document so they can go then and manually enter it within their ERP or their financial application. So completely agree with you. So with that, Jenny, how about you? How do you define process automation?
So, along what you all have said, it is definitely about streamlining your different activities, making sure that you can gain efficiencies around those most repeatable tasks. But I think if you take a look where people are headed now, what you were just speaking about, you and Bruce mentioned around the digitizing, it's really making sure those processes are more efficient by connecting the right content to them at the right steps. And so we want to make sure the content flows to that process so that everybody's working off the same thing, right? You get to that kind of desired single version of the truth. When I think about it from a marketing organization, a lot of that really is gaining that version control over things, making sure people can work off the same set of messages, the same set of inputs all through that process. So I think one of the great things around process automation is we really think about it, it's how we can make ourselves more efficient so that we minimize mistakes and we take out the double work so that our team members and employees can actually spend more time doing those high value activities.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Jenny. I also think back of, one of the things I like to ask customers in my consultancy role is, why you do it that way. Whenever we're going through a process and we're trying to identify inefficiencies, I always like to ask, because I don't want to take anything for granted, right? Maybe there's a reason why they do it a certain way. And more often than not, the response I always get is, well, we've always done it that way. So it's always something where, we get so focused on the things that we do and what's in front of us that we never have any time to think outside of the box. How can we improve this process? And I think, to me, to your point, process automation kind of allows you to do that. It allows you to start removing those duplicate steps that you do, those inefficient steps, the inefficient movements, if you want to call it that, in order for us to free up some time for us to start thinking outside of the box. How can we make this a little more efficient? How can we change the process for the better? Versus always doing the same thing because that's the way we've always done it, right? So I think, kind of going back to, the topic of business process changes, right? I think the first thing we should talk about here is, how do organizations identify process inefficiencies? So Jenny, I think we'll start with you. What are some of the ways that you have identified inefficiencies or bottlenecks within your different roles and organizations?
I think that the simplest place to start is to understand which processes have to happen over and over again, right? Really being able to determine what's a one-off process, what's something that happens every so often, and then what's something that happens very regularly is key. And then you kind of have to take that deep dive into those more regularly executed processes and say, okay, how much resource are we putting into executing these? How much time does it take? What are we getting out of it? And really kind of measure sort of that ROI for that process execution. My guess is when you realize you have highly repeated processes that take a lot of energy, effort, resources, you're probably going to have a lot of inefficiencies because you're spending too much time to get them. through to the end outcome that you want to go to. So I think a lot of it is taking a closer look at really what's impacting the business and where are your people spending the time. And that's going to help identify those inefficiencies or those bottlenecks, right? Those stop gaps. Where do we hit something where there's so many people taking action, then all of a sudden it goes through a funnel and it hits one type of bottleneck and it stalls out there for a period of time, or you lose the visibility into what's happening. Like you get that, you can also start to capture those inefficiencies when questions keep coming up in the organization, like, so what's happening here? Or why didn't we know about that already? Or can we tell? When you start to hear those types of questions, you start to realize that there's some inefficiencies in your processes.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Bruce, is there anything specific that you use in trying to identify inefficient processes within an organization?
I think we're those of us that have been at a company for a while. I've been at Salesforce for 12 plus years. Even though we're sort of all cloud all the time, there's still lots of inefficiencies that we see within our own business. You know, my favorite example is as someone that used to log hundreds of thousands of miles a year. My favorite thing was to complain about the travel and expense management system and how all of that could be approved to be a lot better and a lot more flyer friendly, if you will. And, you know, I think about using a tool like Concur that I've been using for 20 years to book travel and do my expense reports. After 20 years, it still doesn't know who I am, doesn't know my favorite airline, my favorite hotel chain, whether I want the aisle or the window. It still can't tell me, hey, if you do this, you have a much better chance of getting upgraded, or hey, there's lots of seats available on this flight, or this flight has a 42% record of being on time, any of those sort of stuff. There's all sorts of things that could be linked in. They could cause me, that you could save me from having to log in a second or third time to be able to approve some stuff. I think there's lots of things like that in our businesses, whether it's, yeah, we're adding a lot of oversight because an error was made and then you realize you don't really need it. It was one error. So I think there's a lot of stuff. Joe, if I could, I want to just share a great story that I saw in the MIT Sloan Management Review. Can you indulge me for a minute or two?
Absolutely.
This? Okay. The article was written by the CTO from AT&T, and it's called How AT&T Employees Turn Process Gripes into 230 Million Saved. And I had mentioned the example of the executive whose expense report got held up because of an $8 expense that was rejected because of a travel policy technicality. So they call these process gripes raindrops. And they're measuring all of these things. And they define a raindrop as an annoying policy, an outdated process, or a tool that's no longer useful. Anything that hinders rather than helps you and your organization move forward. So far in the 4 years they've been doing this, they've saved 3.6 million hours and they've avoided $230 million in costs. I bring that up because a lot of the stuff they're doing is just really basic. It's not going 100%, you know, end-to-end digital out to their customers and their suppliers and all of that. This is all internal stuff that they're focusing on. They had three drivers. One was back in 2020, they did an annual employee survey, and employees just gave terrible grades to the company's tools, processes, and systems. So knowing that they had a lot of unhappy employees in terms of the technology they had, they wanted to address that. Second was COVID-19 and the impact that had on all of us, you know, suddenly shifting from being office-based to home. And then the third was the focus on business process reengineering, modernization, digitization, and all of that. So what they did was invited employees to submit ideas, and they've had over 270 crowdsourced ideas that get evaluated and acted upon. They had three keys to success. One was it was informal by design, that you could come up with an idea saying, hey, I think we should do this instead because it's really inefficient. And then they act on it. So it doesn't have to be an elaborate, you know, 12-page business plan with, you know, expert opinions or things like that. It's, hey, I think here's some opportunity for savings. The second is that it was driven by employees for employees. And then ironically, longtime employees are the most active in doing this. And then the third was supported from the top. So if you submitted a suggestion for eliminating a raindrop, or as they hashtag stop the flood, because one raindrop leads to more and a flood, it actually got acted upon. So if you're just looking for a little bit of inspiration, it's a quick read, MIT Sloan Management Review. You can sign up and get a free copy and get access to some of their stuff that I think might hopefully help motivate you on your journey to identify everything that's hiding in plain sight. So, Joe, hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, no, that was perfect, and thanks for sharing with that. I'm always surprised that when I talk to somebody, they're responsible. It only takes me a couple of seconds. It only takes me a couple of dollars. But to your point, when you're talking about doing hundreds of these, or possibly even thousands of these a day, those couple of seconds add up. Those couple of cents add up. And at the end of the day, that's real dollars, and it's a real investment that the company has to do. So even the smallest of things that you can change, whether it be a process change, whether it be just a simple movement, could save the company thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing I'd like to ask you about, you kind of alluded this a little bit prior to bringing up the report that you just talked about. You said that your travel and expense tool doesn't recognize you. So with that, can we talk a little bit about emerging technologies? Everybody's talking about AI this and AI that. Do you see AI having a play in any of this? And then what does the future look like with AI and really any other technologies that are out there today?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be a 2024 conference or webinar if we didn't at least talk about generative AI and all the things that happen. I promise I won't get into any discussion LLMs or any of that. I think, I'll give you an example. I think the whole supplier onboarding stuff is ripe for AI and machine learning to be able to streamline a lot of those processes, automate the links to the next steps of things that happen. I remember being down at visiting a very large, well-known apparel company in North Carolina, and they added something like 300 suppliers every week. And it was a huge process. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say it had at least 20 to 30 steps to be able to onboard those processes. How could we take, that flood of raindrops and streamline that so that this apparel company could do a much faster and more efficient job of onboarding suppliers? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for embedding risk management and resiliency into our business processes. I think there's a lot more we could be doing on supplier performance management. That's a hot topic whenever we're talking to our friends in sourcing and procurement.
Yeah, that's perfect with that. I also think, employee onboarding, right? The same type of process as a vendor onboarding process, where you have a lot of forms, there's a lot of people that get involved with it. There's manual tracking of which forms have been entered. And if you can automate some of that, it would make it a lot easier to onboard employees.
Right.
With that, Jenny, if I can come back to you, both in your prior life as well as in your current life, how can companies identify that they have inefficient processes, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges the customers are seeing in identifying these process inefficiencies?
Well, I think one thing to realize is maybe those efficiencies don't come in the way that we automatically think they're going to, initially think they're going to. If I think to one of our current customers here, one of our DocStar customers, Coast Counties, they had a challenge within this business. This is a full service, heavy duty truck and trailer dealership, right? So small business, but in a growing business, operates across several different counties and states. And their challenge was their employee base was changing. They were facing retirement for several members of their administrative task. And as Bruce pointed out earlier, I think you did, Joe, that when you talk to people about their processes, it's the way they've always done it. Well, if the people that have always done it aren't going to be there, you need to think about how you make those changes going forward. And does that open the door for an opportunity to make some adjustments? And in this case, they leaned into technology to help them do that. So they were having to process, well over 2,500 invoices a month through their administrative team. It was all very, very manual. This limited their ability to really get a consolidated, centralized view of what was going on, to be able to track how those invoices are moving through the process, right? Kind of create silos when individuals are doing things, as opposed to being able to get that unified view. And they really had to spend so much time on that. They weren't doing the strategic activities. They were very much limiting the ability for the business to expand. So when they leaned into the technology to help them think through those process changes, think about the process differently, and hand some of it over to automation, they gained a bunch of time back. In fact, in this case, it was pretty remarkable because they were able to increase the number of invoices processed with the same staff and have that staff do much more kind of high value work. And they were able to expand into several new locations that they hadn't been able to do before. So I think it's understanding what that change mechanism is going to be that kind of identifies that inefficiency. Here it was the manual processes, but it was the fact that they had so many employees retiring that sort of gave them the insight to those inefficiencies and allowed them to work through it. I think we've seen that, across different AP processes. We've seen that across different customer bases, and I think, or customer situations, but I even see it internally in my team. So if I think about marketing, which is a little bit different from the invoicing side of things, but we work with a lot of content. We have a lot of approvals that you need to go through. We need to make sure that our tactics and materials hit the right regions and industry groups that we want it to go out to, and we have to make sure that we do it accurately. I think there's a lot of process in there that we're starting to look at and say, okay, how do we make this more efficient, and how do we lean into technology to give us the consistency that we're after? One of the big values of moving towards automation is that consistency. Not only does it give you the visibility into what's happening, let you understand and take action on any issues that come up, but it gives you the ability also to audit it and know what's successful and not, but to make sure that what you're doing is consistent every time. And you build trust with that content as you gain that consistency. And I think the trust is really where we want to get to.
Yeah, and my wife has a saying that, place your tag here is a problem, right? And tribal knowledge could be a problem, right? A lot of times, it's not documented. You just do it because that's what you do every day. Whether you're talking, claims processing, or you're talking about invoice processing, your claim numbers, those GL accounts, and it's just inherent to you. It's that tribal knowledge. That XYZ means ABC, and not having it documented could be a real problem. The other thing I found too, to your point, Jenny, is that a lot of those folks with a tribal knowledge, they know that they're part of an inefficient process, and they've come up with a way of making that process a little more efficient. So in their eyes and everybody else's eyes, they kind of become the heroes of the group, right? So a lot of times it's difficult to try to get those customers to give up that hero status and give up what they're doing from that tribal knowledge. So I can completely understand that. Staying with you, Jenny, can you share with us some specific examples of simple processes that can take advantage of automation? Is there anything specific that you've seen within, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years that as you walk in the door, you can say, yep, that's something that requires, or that should be using automation?
Automation, yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, sales order automation is always a good one, right? How to move a sales order through a process, make sure the right approvals are there, make sure that all the right information is there so that it can get processed very well. definitely making sure that we have purchase order acknowledgements in terms of things that are taking place. If you think about the move to what we all do, buy so much more online, you want to be able to make sure that as someone places an order online, that there's the process behind it to actually fulfill it and make sure that it gets executed appropriately and to the customer's expectations and in the way that they would expect it to happen. We talked about invoice processing. I think one thing you mentioned earlier is employee onboarding is really an opportunity there. I know that we see that in my organization. When you have organizations that have a lot of growth or a lot of people change, for us and in our marketing organization at a larger company, right, we have our business development reps. Probably most people on the webinar here, and you guys probably experience them. These are the folks that give you a call to say, hey, are you interested in? And we want to make sure we try to kind of build our marketing funnel with these business development folks. This is a group within the organization that we bring in, we train up, and then very often they move into other parts of our organization, right? They move into sales, they move into customer support. And so we're constantly hiring for this role. This is a really important role in my world. This is a role that helps me make sure that we build the appropriate pipeline for our sales teams, right? That we help continue the growth of the company. And so I really look to that process automation and the employee onboarding to not only give it the consistency that I want, so I know the right person, people are brought in and they're onboarded in the time we expected, but to make sure that that timeline is as tight as possible. The more gap I have with people on the phones, the more at risk my pipeline is, right? There's a direct correlation here. So I want to make sure that I get them on the phones and enabled very quickly, right? It's not just making sure we have the right forms and lines signed and I's dotted and T's crossed, but it's making sure that they understand how to communicate the value and can start having those meaningful conversations. So we want to make sure that we can get them on board very quickly. So I see that automation is a way in that process. The onboarding is not only to get them into the company, but to get them effective in the company. How do we automate and help them, guide them through some of their training sides of things? I think we can also look at it from, different examples that we've talked about, onboarding agencies. It doesn't have to be people, it can be vendors and agencies as well. And in this day and age, when we take a look at how much information is out there and what we're online, there are a lot of different security checks that we need to go through with our vendors. I do from the marketing side, at least, and make sure that we have different documentation in place as that vendor starts to work with us, what access they're allowed to have within our own systems. So there's a lot of good kind of checks and balances for the company in terms of security measures that we want to do. And I think the process automation around making sure that we securely bring on these agencies is something that helps us build trust with our customers and our employees as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Bruce, back to you. Maybe same question. What are some examples of inefficiencies or bottlenecks that are hiding in plain sight? Right, part of our session title today that companies or that you have identified as quick wins.
Well, being a CRM company, we often get asked, what are the best practices or what other companies my size or my industry doing to improve their customer service operations or their marketing or sales or things like that. But because we've been around for so long, we also get pulled into areas outside of CRM. And one that jumped out at me as I was listening to Jenny was a project we were doing for one of the world's best known consumer products companies that is in the shampoo and hair products space. They came in and said, hey, can you help us improve manufacturing, which is not a request we get every day. And we said, sure, what's the issue? They said, we're running, I think it's 18 production lines, and we're running them 3 shifts a day. And at the end of every shift, an employee comes by with a notepad and starts writing down all of the data gathered from the various equipment hanging off of that production line in terms of, volume and what's been produced and any slowdowns and what have you. And they said, then they go back to an office, they enter all this stuff in an Excel spreadsheet, and they don't really have any time to do with the data. And then we said, why don't you just automate the data collection? So we worked with them on that, and they did it. Net, they turned those data collectors into data analysts. And so they have much more information as to what's going on. And the people that were, had that old role are so happy to be able to escape the tentacles of spreadsheets and be able to make some recommendations on process improvements. One of the things also that we're doing, and this might not be 100% relevant to today's audience, but our CFO was just quoted in an article on CNBC about a week and a half ago, and talked about how we're currently using AI today in various use cases. And she named 3. One was to help forecast revenues, and we've been doing that for a long time. A second is kind of an obvious one, flag quotes with abnormal terms, and those automatically get flagged for review. And this one is probably applicable to all of us. Predict the likelihood that the customer will pay on time. So, I love that. And knowing our CFO, I can hear her saying that. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I'd say if somebody could figure that out, they could probably make a ton of money, right? When are we going to get paid? When are customers going to be sending us a check for services rendered? I think that's a good one. With that also, we're talking about changing people's processes, changing their day to day. There has to be other transformational challenges, right? So, Bruce, sticking with you, what are some of the transformational challenges that you're seeing within the market today?
There's a whole bunch, and some of them are people related, and some of them are process related, and some of them are technology related. On the tech side, the number one concern that everyone has is, how good is my data? So you have a lot of people rushing into these Gen AI projects only to realize they have terrible data. And sadly, it's particularly bad within the retail industry, that there's data everywhere, but you still don't really have a good view of who the customer actually is and the actions that they're taking and what they're likely to do next. So that's one. Also, in addition to, getting good, clean, accurate data, a lot of us are suffering from technical debt, meaning we're running these really old systems and we have lots of applications. We don't even know if anyone's still using them. So I think a classic example is the number of shops still running COBOL. It's kind of hard to believe in this day and age that that's still there. Or, as we were joking before this started, there's probably still a lot of applications out there written in Lotus Notes or Domino that people are still using internally. And you say, geez, it's 2024. And then on the other side, sometimes on some of these new initiatives where you're going, you inadvertently set up a lot of internal competition, and people don't necessarily want to share data or want to get involved. So managing the internal politics is always something you need to be cognizant of. So I'd say that I'd love to hear Jenny's experience, and Joe, yours. You've been doing this for a long time as well, to see what I may have missed.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Jenny, would you like to go ahead and expand on that and see what your experience has been on that?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I want to go back because, Bruce, I think you brought up a really interesting point when you were using that manufacturing example about how the data recorders turned into data analysts. I think one of the things that, as company leaders think about moving through change, the leadership teams, they have to think about the opportunities they're going to give to their employees through that, and that the evolving role is there, and there is people generally want to expand their role in their position, right? I think whether it's necessarily a title change, I'm not saying that. I think it's more the impact on the business. I think, Joe, you mentioned that early on when you talked about the people want to be the hero. So they find those little efficiency gains. They want to be the hero in their roles. So I think leadership teams have to help facilitate that evolution in those roles for people. Because as we look at the opportunity to think about leaning into technology, whether it be AI, whether it be removing that technical debt, we want them to be able to take part in that evolution with us, or that change management process with it, not be something we just kind of force onto the organization. There has to be sort of an overall benefit to everybody there. I think, this comes with leadership being able to step in and not only embrace the change, but embrace the technologies. I think it's fun here, yes, everybody is using AI in one way or another. We're using it within the marketing department. I know different groups here at Epicor are using it. I'm using it. I need to make sure I understand what my team can do with it and what type of guardrails we want to have on it. And I need to embrace that change if I want my team to embrace that change. So I think a lot of that is making sure, as we look towards having companies think differently about their processes, start to, if they've identified those inefficiencies and want to take steps to address them, the leadership really needs to sort of walk the walk and help that company embrace change.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Jenny. And Bruce, to your point, my outdated systems still work, right? So why do I need to change them? Now, to your point, it's 20 years, 30 years old technology, and it may not be effective in today's world, but a lot of people, again, they don't have that time or experience of stepping back and saying, wait a minute, yes, it's working, but is there something out there that's a little more efficient, something out there that will benefit us as a company a little bit more? And I think it all comes down to, again, how can we minimize the amount of time somebody has to touch a document, somebody has to touch something in order to free up some of that time? So with that, Jenny, I'll go back to you. What are some strategies that you recommend for managing change and overcoming resistance to automation within an organization?
Well, I think it's really aligning around those goals, right? Making sure that everybody's on the same page for what you're doing. Change just for change's sake isn't going to inspire anybody. Change to help get your business somewhere, to be able to give people new opportunities, to expand your business model, to address something internally, just to make your employees' lives easier, is usually going to be something that can help, inspire them to get in and engage. I think another key part of this is making sure that you are partnering with the right people to go down this journey with, right? As you think through who you're going to work with for your partner, for the change, do you need outside consultants? Do you need a technology vendor? Do you need different parts of the organization to come together? So thinking through kind of the change management aspect of it is, I think, a key thing. One place I've seen it fall down, and I've seen it fall down in, customers across multiple different companies, is when people think technology on its own is going to solve the problem. I'm going to implement this system and that's going to take care of it. And I don't think about really the impact of what implementing a system's going to be. And that, not only is it changing maybe the process steps, but it's how people learn about it, how people act with it. What, when do you need to check into it? What type of notifications do you get, right? Is it people have a set way of going through their email, for example, and what do they need to see? And do they need to log into something else? So there's lots of parts of this that we think about holistically, what the impact is going to be. And if you don't bring all the different parts of your organization to the table and give people a voice, if you don't think about the right partner you want to work with, and you just kind of lean into just a technology doing it, you're not going to get out of it what you want. It's going to cost more, it's going to take longer, and you're not going to realize the greatest gain. But if you do really think about it as a partnership within the organization and a partnership with your vendor, you're going to actually probably move more quickly and maybe even identify other opportunities to improve along the way. Once people kind of get that, juice going to make the change and address the inefficiencies, they tend to identify more, and you kind of get even a bigger bang for your buck.
Yeah, and those are great points. And I often have this discussion with customers, right? They, change for the sake of change, or technology for the sake of technology. And I always talk to customers, why are you looking at technology? Well, I have an inefficient process, but I don't want to change my process. So they want to take the inefficient process that they have, and they think that just by adding technology, it's going to automatically make it an efficient process. And there's some changes there, right? Adding automation specifically
Right.
automatically eliminates some of the manual steps that you currently have today. So it is very important to make sure that we're not changing just for the sake of changing, that there is a reason behind the change, and there is a reason why we're choosing the technology for that change, because sometimes the technology may not be the right um, fit for the change itself.
Yeah. And you want to make sure people adopt it. If the technology doesn't ultimately get used, you're in trouble there too. So people need to be willing to adopt it. And that's part of how you have to embrace the overall change.
Yeah, and in my mind, that's the number one thing, right? That's the number one reason why process initiatives fail, is because of user adoption, right? If you don't have user buy-in, whether we're talking at the executive level, whether we're talking at the end user perspective, if there isn't buy-in, then that process change is going to fail, regardless of what kind of technology you add or what kind of changes you've made. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So Bruce, and kind of keeping in the same type of idea here and thought of mind, how do you balance the need for automation with the importance of maintaining a human touch within like customer interactions?
Oh my God. How many times have you gotten stuck with an annoying bot and you use every possible word you can think of? You're screaming into your phone, human, agent, whatever could possibly be, to bypass that, and you can't do it. Or I had an example just yesterday. I got notified by MasterCard of a potential fraudulent charge on my card. And at first, I didn't recognize who the vendor was, so I said, "Yeah, maybe it is fraudulent. I don't remember authorizing them." Well, as it turns out, my wife and I were in Italy last week, and we bought some wine, and getting it shipped back, and the company that MasterCard identified as a fraudulent transaction was actually the shipping company. So I called them to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry about this." Gave him another credit card, but I had to call multiple times because the phone number was in Italian only. And my Italian's limited to please, thank you, buonasera, buongiorno, basic stuff like that. So it didn't help that I was talking to a machine when I couldn't understand any of the prompts or what the instructions were. So yeah, just another crazy American traveler, I guess. But no, you're right. You have to understand, you have to think about not so much the benefit to you, it's got to be the benefit to your customer so that they keep coming back. And if you make it impossible for them to complete the simplest things, it's not a good investment.
Yeah, and I feel your pain. I was actually born in Portugal, so I go to Europe a lot, but I speak Portuguese, but no other language, right? So English and Portuguese. I don't speak French. I don't speak Italian. I go through the same things, right?
I speak restaurant French and Italian.
Oh, there you go.
I can order, sometimes with disastrous results.
Well, as long as you're adventurous, I guess, in your eating habits, you could try anything, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, to your point, I mean, even being here in the States and just calling and having to go through yelling at your phone with whatever representative, or my name is Joe, or I need one versus two. It could be very frustrating. So yeah, I think there is a fine line between adding the automation and to your point, like you said, Sometimes the automation may make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to your customers, and really that's your business.
Right.
Regardless of whether you're offering a product or a service, at the end of the day, if you don't have those customers, your product or service is just going to sit on the shelf, and nobody's going to purchase it. So, yeah, those are good points. Thank you for that.
Joe, I think I'd add on to that a little bit.
Sure.
One of the things that we need to also think about when we talk about automation supporting that customer interaction is the visibility it gives you. When your processes and your information has been digitized, you have fewer mistakes, and that information can be served up more often in a way that can be consumed and then given out to a customer in a really good way. So you have an opportunity as you kind of streamline some processes. And I think we've seen this with some of our customers when they had greater visibility into their invoice reconciliation or their credit processes. They're able to actually help customers better because they have access to that data. So I think there is sort of the give and take with this. And I think this is the interesting part about finding the balance. Yes, those automated phone lines can be very treacherous at times to make your way through. But when you get there and actually, or get to someone, they may be able to help you much more quickly and efficiently because the back end process that's serving them the information has been digitized and they have accurate data to give you. So I think there's a real plus as we think about this process automation too.
Right. Jenny, I completely agree. How maddening was it in the past when you had to, if you called someone and they said, I'm going to have to give you to a supervisor or another department. Meanwhile, you've just spent 10 minutes explaining what the issue is and what you need resolved. And then you get handed off to someone else. And if you don't get disconnected, you end up repeating the same spiel that you had just delivered before, and you do it over and over. So I think at some point, Apple's going to develop a blood pressure app for the iPhone that just warns you that you're approaching a dangerous high blood pressure level to let it go and call back in the morning.
Yeah, and not only that, but to expand that a little bit further, if you're just dealing with paper, right? Maybe not going to talk to a manager or anybody else, but having a customer call you and ask you a question about a document, and you saying, "Oh, let me go search for that document," and in some cases, let me go retrieve that document from offsite storage. So let me call you back in 3 days after I receive the document and I look things through, right? And having to wait like that, and then sometimes to your point, Bruce, not even having the same customer rep call you back, having somebody else call you back, and having to initiate the conversation and retell your story of what's going on. A lot of inefficiencies out there, and I think those are all some great points. I think we're kind of coming up to the top of the hour here, so I think I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Jenny, to maybe as a final question, what are some key takeaways or a piece of advice that you would give to businesses that may be considering embarking on a journey of process transformation?
Yeah, I think that the very first thing is have a clear understanding of the opportunity you're trying to address, right? Don't, as we spoke to earlier, don't just implement for implementation's sake. Know what you want to try to address and make sure that you've really had those conversations with the key stakeholders within your business and you're all on the same page. I think that's a key place to start, and then start to make sure that you really do engage with the right partner on this and be choosy. There's a lot of technology that's out there. I am in marketing. I've seen lots of really great demos get delivered. Technology demos are very fun. Make sure you really do understand what the benefits are to your company as you evaluate those technologies and that they align with your ultimate goals. I think you can get swayed very easily by really cool looking stuff, but if it's not going to address your actual business need, you're going to get into a situation where you're going to struggle and then maybe have to make a change later. So kind of keeping that kind of eye on the end goal of really what you're trying to achieve for your business. I know that sounds super basic and everyone's like, of course, that's what we do. I've seen it far too often where you think you have an idea and maybe the whole business isn't aligned or the key stakeholders in the business aren't aligned. And that's where scope creep comes in. And as soon as scope creep comes in, you start misaligning to those goals. And that's where companies run into trouble and don't get the benefits. So I think staying very, very fixed on what you're trying to achieve is really key.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially the part where find the right vendor, right? I've
Yes.
seen so many times as a consultant where I come in with different teams from different companies, and it's amazing how different they are, and just going in there saying, well, I understand what your business process is, I understand what your inefficiencies are because I just spoke to the guy down the street, but not understanding that these inefficiencies are very specific to this company, right? And just assuming that because the guy down the street was experiencing some inefficiencies that this new customer is, so going in there with the right partner that's going to go in and try to really understand what you're trying to do and what your business is. It's one thing to understand, let's say, the manufacturing business. It's another thing to understand the customers from customer to customer, right? And going in there and really try to say, what are you trying to address here? What is the end vision here? Because it is going to be different from customer to customer. So getting that right partner is key in all of that.
Definitely. And there's more than one path to good, right? So that's where it really becomes important to understand what your path to good is for your company, because the manufacturer down the street could have another really good path to good for them. But those two paths don't have to be the same. And that's where the right vendor can help you make sure you stay on the right path for your company.
I like that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to steal it. I'm going to use it. Path to good.
There you go.
I want to take that one for me. Bruce, same question for you. Any closing thoughts on, advice that you would give anybody that's looking to add process automation to their environments?
Well, yeah, I want to piggyback on one of the points you made, Joe, and that is thinking about the employee experience. That's really important because I think I have a colleague who's written a book on why you should invest in the employee experience because of the overflow effect it has on improving the customer experience. So I think those are important, as well as, most of what we've been thinking about today might be tied to the maybe supplier experience or more likely supplier management. So I would really focus on some of the areas we've talked about, the onboarding, the performance management, the ratings and all that sort of stuff. I would also spend more time thinking about risk and resilience and hope that we can pick up on some of the things we learned during COVID. During COVID, everyone became a supply chain expert. You'd go into a restaurant and you'd order your favorite dish and they'd say, I'm sorry, we don't have it, we're out. And you go, wait a minute, I've eaten this every time I've been in your restaurant. And they said, yeah, our suppliers can't deliver. They don't have enough drivers to get product to Boston or whatever it may be. Or that, in order to keep as many customers happy as possible, you greatly reduce the number of SKUs that you provided so you could focus on the strategic ones. Think about that. Well, you changed your planning cycles from 13 weeks to 5 weeks to try and become more responsive. So think of a way, if you can, to capture all that institutional knowledge over the last couple of years in terms of how to best work with your suppliers and things like that. And then the other thing is, the sourcing procurement people have a really difficult job. Part of it is driven by external politics that they have no control over. But, there's been a lot of focus on nearshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, moving operations from China. There was just a push for one of the chip manufacturers to rely less on Chinese manufacturers and do more of the manufacturing in Mexico. Well, that's something that a lot of companies aren't set up for, to do that type of stuff. So, I guess our friends that have dialed in today are going to be on a constant learning journey, and I guess wish them the best. The stuff that we're talking about hiding in plain sight, I think there's a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of big issues too that they're going to have to focus on as they move up in their careers within their companies or maybe in the next place they work at. So I wish them the best.
Yeah, those were some great points, and thanks for that. On the employee thing, I completely agree. At a previous life, I used to work for Pitney Bowes, and my manager at the time said he didn't really focus on customers. He focused on his employees, and he figured that if he took care of his employees, then his employees would in turn take care of the customers. So his focus was really internal and trying to make sure the employees had whatever tools they needed, things like that, to make sure that they could do their job and they could then serve their customers in the best way possible. So I completely agree with that. And I think, we're almost up at an hour here. So I think I want to go ahead and thank both Jenny and Bruce for their time today and their input and their leadership within the industry and their background. Great conversation, guys. Thank you very much. And just for me, hopefully to those folks that are out there listening, hopefully you'll see that there is great advantages and great benefits of adding automation to your processes. Whether you start small or you look at a bigger process, remember that those small wins add up. And whether you're talking about saving, to Bruce's point about the AT&T article that he read about, it's $8, but $8 to a company of AT&T size adds up to a ton of money. I think Bruce mentioned that it was it $230 million over 3 years in savings. That adds up, guys. So think about it. Look within your own processes within your organization of where do you feel like there's some inefficient movements, there's some inefficient processes that you can add automation to. And remember, it's not just change for the sake of change, not technology for the sake of adding technology. It has to be the right fit, and it has to be with the right partner. So with that, again, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate your time. Thank you to those of you who are out there and listening, and wish you guys a great day and a great rest of the week.